I bought a PlayStation VR last year and I love it. Astrobot and Beat Saber were some of my favourite games in 2018 and I can't wait for Blood and Truth to come out in May later this year. So when I saw Labo first announced, I was just thinking like, skeptical, will this work, won't this work? And then I saw the price of £35 as the standard Labo kit, which is the one I got in the end, and thought, £35? Maybe. For some cardboard, don't know. Comes with the game as well, let's see. Then I looked online and actually found it for £28 and thought, do you know what, sod it, I'm gonna get it. So I did, hence why this video. So I only got the starter kit, which comes with the blaster, cannon thing, the VR goggles, and this like pinwheel thing. I might get the other ones down the line, but we'll get to that later in the video. This is actually the first Labo I've ever bought, because last year I looked at Labo that came out and thought, this looks unique and fun, but there's so much cardboard, and when you make it and everything, I just thought, where am I going to put it all? I don't have the biggest space, so I thought, this probably isn't for me, I'm not going to get it. But then, now it's VR, I thought, I'm going to have to get it, because I love VR. Obviously, Labo is a lot more basic than PlayStation VR, let alone Vive and Oculus. But the thing is it worth the money it is? Because at the end of the day, you can get PlayStation VR for about £180, maybe 200, but that's as long as you have a PlayStation itself. I can't speak for Vive and Oculus because I don't have a PC that can run that sort of stuff. I won't be comparing VR headsets to the Oculus and Vive, so we'll just leave it at that. The really cool thing about Labo is, I think half the fun is actually building the stuff, which I'm sure is the same thing what can be said about the Labo that came out last year as well. See, as a kid, I absolutely loved building Legos and Connects and Meccano, and just like following instructions and just watching your piece just build and grow and finally have that end product and just feel really satisfying when you finished it. So as someone in my late 20s now, who hasn't touched that Lego construction stuff for the best part of 15 years, actually really cool to go back to that inner child and re-experience that feeling. The VR goggles themselves took me about 30 minutes and pretty easy, but the blaster took about 2 hours, was a lot more complicated than I originally thought, but to be honest, I didn't have any problems with it. I just followed the on-screen instructions and that was that. Although I will say that when I did finish it, I didn't quite understand how to pull back the trigger thing. You lock and load it to fire, so you have to do that every time you want to fire, you have to pull back to lock. But the game didn't actually tell me that, and I didn't really watch any videos on it prior, so I had no idea. So I was just pulling the trigger and pulling the thing back and just thought, how does this thing work? Then when I realised what I was doing wrong, I felt like a complete moron. So I don't know if that was the only person to do that, but yeah, that was a thing I experienced and I feel really embarrassed about it. Especially when you consider this thing's aimed at like 7-year-olds. For what it is, it's actually extremely accessible, but it doesn't have a strap, so it discourages long play sessions as your arms will ache after about 30 minutes of extended play. Also, the Switch only lasts about 2 to 3 hours anyway before needing to be charged. Something the PlayStation VR doesn't have to worry about because it's plugged into the system and has its own power supply. There's that cynic in me that makes me think Nintendo don't want kids to be playing the VR headset for anything more than 30 minutes. So to sort of get around that without having to put warnings up every half an hour when you play it, which they actually still do in game, I feel like that they've decided to not have a strap so you just get tired of playing the game and then you just put it down. But that's just my own sort of like guess. I wouldn't put it past them that they chose not to put straps on just so you would get tired of playing it after half an hour. Now I'm going to be moving into some of the negatives, and with the negatives themselves I will be comparing this pretty much directly to the PlayStation VR because that's the only experience I've actually had. And one of the downsides is that the screen door effect is way more noticeable. You can clearly see the screen in front of your face. And also when you've been making a lot of the cardboard stuff, loads of sort of little bits of debris of cardboard get on your screen. You might not notice that until you actually slide it into the headset itself, put it up to your face and you see loads of dots all over the inside of the screen. So yeah, make sure that you clean that Switch screen pretty damn well. I personally really look after my Switch a lot, so I don't have any scratches on it, even though I don't actually have like a protector on my Switch. I would imagine if your Switch hasn't been looked after too well and you've got loads of scratches and dents or something, when you look through the goggles, you're probably going to notice that because, like I said, just little pieces of little specks of cardboard that you wouldn't have even noticed before you put it in the headset, you'll notice as soon as it's right up to your face. Other downsides is that it doesn't have full body tracking, so it won't register you standing up or even leaning side to side, which I did try to do in a couple of games where you have these targets in the distance and I literally tilted my head to the side to look around an object, and then it was really jarring to see that it didn't actually work. So most of the games don't ever require you to do stuff like that, but there are a couple of times when that did happen and I was like, oh yeah, there's no camera or anything, there's no like sensor bar of any kind that can detect you and where you're moving, this is all just done with a gyro. So on that front, it is really basic. I mean, even the resolution is a lot lower than other VR units, especially again compared to the PlayStation VR, but to be honest, I don't think it's that much worse. Like, considering that it's just a Switch screen that's, I think, like 720p, the Switch's screen itself, I was really concerned about how the resolution would look right up to your face, and I'll be honest, I didn't have any problems with it. Yeah, it's not as good as the PlayStation VR, but I don't think it's that much worse. However, I will say that some of the objects in the distance are a little worse, and especially when I was playing with the blaster, turning quite sharply in some movements, I did find that there was a slight blur effect to it. Whether that's just the power of the Switch itself, or they're just trying to negate something there, that was something that I noticed, and to be honest, some PSVR games actually have that problem as well, so it's not necessarily a hardware issue, more just perhaps the game I played with the blaster, that was a blurry effect that I didn't particularly like. But then you come across these, like, some of the larger enemies, and to be honest, they look really crisp still. The actual overall build quality, like, when you consider that this is made out of cardboard, it's actually really sturdy. Although I will say that I don't know how long this will last, especially with the blaster. Like, the main VR headset where you just got the Switch in with the Joye Cons either side, like, that's fine. But the blaster, as sturdy as that thing feels when you first make it, I've played it quite a few times since, and I've had other people play it as well, and I've started to see some, like, sort of dents and creases where it's been used quite a few times now. So this is something that you will not be coming back to in 5-10 years and it'll be fine. Like, if you manage to get cardboard and rebuild it again, then sure, but I can't see this thing surviving, like, your loft for the next, like, decade. This is definitely the sort of, like, VR that you buy more of a short term than a long term. But then again, like, you think about PlayStation VR in 10 years time, will that thing be relevant? No, it won't. So it really depends on how you care about that sort of stuff. But yeah, it doesn't really supply you with any spares per se, although it does give you some, like, spare elastic bands, because yeah, with the blaster there's some elastic bands in there, so they've given you some spares there, which is nice, I guess, but that's pretty much who you're going to get. I will say though, if you never really experienced virtual reality and you're really interested, this is actually a great experience to try virtual reality for the first time. I heard some people sort of skeptical about that, like, why would you want to try this as your first VR experience with a bad, like, resolution screen, which yeah, I also had, like, my own concerns going into it as well on that front, but I think that this is a perfect way to start with VR, because if you find this, like, really fun and enjoyable, then from there I think you could then go, okay, maybe I'll get one of the more expensive headsets, because at the end of the day, like, it cost me £28 with the game, with these two things that you build. I think it's definitely worth the money. The thing is though, now I have this blaster and I've played through the game, I kind of have that sitting in a drawer now. Sure, I'll probably get it out again just to play it here and there and maybe, like, introduce it to some friends and family or something, but it's kind of sitting there. It's actually quite big, so that in a way has put me off getting the other VR Labo packs, because I really want to play them. The bird one looks especially cool, and I actually really want to make them, because like I said, making Labo is half of the enjoyment, honestly, but it's the after effect. It's like, okay, when you unwrap your Christmas presents, you got, oh yeah, you got the enjoyment of unwrapping it is fantastic, then you get the present, now you got all this wrapping paper everywhere. What do you do with it? Well, with that stuff you just chuck it. The Labo, you're like, I don't want to chuck it because I still want to be able to use it, and I still want to be able to keep it for, like, future use, but you can't really flat pack it anyway without ruining it. I've not tried to take it apart, but I wouldn't really want to try, honestly. But the actual, like, games themselves and how accurate the Joye Cons are is actually really surprising. I always knew that the Joye Cons were really accurate and had, like, some really cool tech in them with, like, the HD rumble and whatnot, but I tell you what, when you've got them in the blaster or you got them at certain aspects, like with a pinwheel where you're blowing stuff, it's really surprising how well the Joye Cons pick up on stuff like this, because there was never a time when I would pull back the trigger on the blaster or move one of the Joye Cons around and I thought, oh, this is out of sync, or that didn't work. It works all the time. In fact, when you're going through the headset, there's a button that you tap on the top of the headset to confirm things. You double tap it, but it's not actually a button. You are essentially just tapping on cardboard, which is registering inside the Switch, I think. The vibrations of it calls to it, and I don't know, it's really weird how you just tap like an invisible button and it works. The main blaster itself is honestly really great. Basically, it's like an on-rails section where you move around and you shoot stuff, like shoot aliens for high scores, and then you got, like, this giant enemy crab where you must attack its weak spot. I can't believe that the memes are true, finally. But seriously, it's a giant enemy crab when you do attack its weak spot. The best way to play this is definitely on, like, a swivel chair of some kind, like an office chair where you can rotate around. Some of the best PlayStation VR games I've played have sort of been the ones where you sit down and you're in a sitting position, because I find that they're just the most comfortable ways to play VR. And this blaster mode is a really good game. It's short and it's a lot of sort of like high score based stuff, but it does the job, and it does the job perfectly well. Like, this is a Nintendo-ass game where it's polished polished, it's simple, it's short, but it's just really fun. There's also this like cool 2-player mode where you shoot the fruit into these hippos, and the idea is that when you shoot the fruit into a hippo, it comes towards your area, and you just take it in turns passing back and forth the headset, which is really easy because that is maybe the one positive thing about not having a head strap or anything like that. Where PlayStation VR, there's certain games where you pass the headset back and forth, there's a little bit of a procedure. Okay, I've got to put the headset on, got to adjust it, adjust the zoom in and out, get comfortable for each individual person. Whereas in the Labo VR, like, okay, pass it back, you easily pass it to and from. And I really hope that there's more modes like this where you can have like just a really cool competitive game where you just take it in turns. Unlike the PlayStation VR where you hook it up to the TV, you can see on the TV what the other person's doing. In the hippo thing, because it's a lot more strategy based of you throwing the fruit at certain hippos and maybe whistle to turn them around in different angles, also have to slow down the time mechanic thing where you can see what fruit each hippo wants. So there's a lot of like, okay, I'm figuring this stuff out while the player sitting next to me is eagerly waiting, which to be fair, like now I think about it, they're kind of just sitting there not doing anything because they can't even see what you're doing. But it adds an element of sort of like strategy to, okay, they can't see what I'm doing. So I really want to see more of that stuff in the games where you don't want to be screen watching people, so you can actually maybe, I don't know, have like a strategy game where you're moving troops around in VR but you can't see the opponent what they're doing. I don't know, stuff like that will be really cool in future. Other than that though, there's like a bunch of these mini games on there that are like sort of pre-installed on the Labo itself, which honestly they're just like these proof of concepts that are designed in this thing called Labo Garage, which was also on the old Labo headsets as well. And I briefly went into it, saw how complicated it is, and was like, nope. I instead would love to see what other people create with this thing instead, which is a real shame because there's no online sharing function, because I don't know why. Hopefully there's like an update where they actually include this later down the line. I wouldn't hold my breath, but who knows? Nintendo have done this sort of stuff with other games. I mean, I look at Smash Brothers, for example. They included a really robust stage builder like 6 months after that game came out on the Switch. I'm not convinced that that's going to happen, which is a real shame because, again, now I've finished with the virtual reality for now. I don't know what to do because I could watch other people's online. I'm sure they're going to create some great stuff with this, but without even the ability to share your creations on the system itself, I don't think it's going to encourage as many people creating stuff as like you look at Smash Brothers. The thing is, if you actually don't like virtual reality in this headset, again, I've not actually had anyone that felt sick playing this one, you can actually play the entire thing out of VR where you just stick the screen into the blaster or whatever headset that you've got as a VR Labo, and you play it outside of virtual reality, so you see just one image on the screen. So it's pretty much what Nintendo Labo was last year. I imagine so. Again, I've not got it. So yeah, there's an option if for whatever reason virtual reality makes you sick. But the thing is, what is there next for virtual reality on Labo? Like I said, there's other packs that I don't have. I'm thinking about getting them, but with the lack of space, I don't really fancy having more cardboard rubbish. So moving on to one of the main reasons why I actually got Labo VR was because of the tease before they released the thing, which was very clever by Nintendo. They released a tease for 3 updates of Super Mario Odyssey and The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild VR updates. And as soon as I saw these like bonus levels of Mario Odyssey, I'm just like, oh my god, I love Astrobot. This is Astrobot-esque with Mario. I thought, yes, that's exactly what I want. So now these are actually being released. What do I think of both these 3 updates for the 2 Nintendo games? Well, first of all, Mario Odyssey is just 3 little mini bonus missions that take about 5 minutes each. Apparently it looks pretty good, and again, it sort of reminds me a lot of Astrobot, but I actually haven't played it because I realised that I let my friend Ryan borrow my copy of Mario Odyssey about 6 months ago and he hasn't given it back, so thanks Ryan. But to be honest, am I disappointed not playing this? Yes, but it just looks like 3 little mini bonus missions in Odyssey, not a lot. One of the main draws really was Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. The entire thing is playable in VR. But what do I actually think of it? Because I'm so conflicted on this. On one hand, it is so cool to actually play Breath of the Wild in VR because it does work, right? You put the headset on, you can see it, and it's got a pretty cool feeling to it. There is a slight nauseating feeling, I will admit, because it runs at 30 frames, whereas Mario Odyssey runs at 60, so I imagine that game looks a lot better. Other Labo VR games as well, they run at 60. The cutscenes, however, are like sort of in this weird screen format, similar to what you would see in PlayStation VR when you're on like the main PlayStation menu. You just see like a black void with a screen in front of you, whereas the actual game is all completely in virtual reality. I've heard loads of people that have tried to combat some of the problems with it because you move your head to move the camera a little bit, but you can also use the sticks. You can turn that stuff off in the options, fine, but I don't care what anyone says, you can't play this entire game in VR, and if you do, you're a madman, because the Great Plateau, the starting area, even with the update, like playing it in handheld mode, the frame rate is just not good enough. I'm sorry, infamously, the Korok Forest in Breath of the Wild at launch was absolutely dreadful for its frame rate. They updated it and it's way better. In handheld mode, still not great. In docked mode, they improved the frame rate in these areas significantly, which is where I played the majority of Breath of the Wild. I played it in docked mode, but because this is Labo VR, it's undocked, which means you're playing sub 30 frames in your face, and I'm sorry, it's a cool novelty, and for me that's all it is. So if you actually want to get Labo VR specifically to play Breath of the Wild VR, you're gonna be slightly disappointed. And speaking of the PlayStation VR, there's been reports that you can actually hook it up to your Nintendo Switch and play it through there, which I have tried, but I don't know whether it's either me or if they've done an update of some kind, but I've gone through the steps that I've read online and seen online, and it didn't work for me. Maybe it's because I have an original model and people who have been trying this have got the existing ones. I don't really know. All I know is that I've seen videos of people where it works. I followed their exact instructions and it did not work for me. So just putting it out there, if you have a PlayStation VR and you want to play Breath of the Wild in VR, it's not maybe 100% going to be working. And on top of that, even if you do get it to work, apparently it doesn't have any motion head tracking, which to me completely negates having it in virtual reality in the first place. It's just a 3D image in your face, and I feel like that's just pointless. Yeah, you have the luxury of having a strap on your face because it's PlayStation VR, whereas Labo doesn't have a strap. But other than that, it just seems kind of pointless. However, you are going to be getting the cool games in Labo VR anyway, so there's a plus there. But for me, nah, Breath of the Wild in VR, it's a cool gimmick. That's all I'll say is it's a cool gimmick. I've put over 100 hours into this game. I would no way be willing to do that again in virtual reality. But I really, really do like the fact that Nintendo are doing this with their older games. You know, bearing in mind that Breath of the Wild is over 2 years old now, and they're putting in this free patch to play in VR. So I just think like, I really want to see them do this for other Nintendo games as well. Like Mario Kart 8 would be the obvious choice, and maybe going to first person mode. Bearing in mind that game runs at 60, so I think that Mario Kart 8 would be a perfect choice for that. Recently released Yoshi's Crafted World as well. Having that depth, that'd be really cool in virtual reality. But one of the biggest missed opportunities, honestly, is Captain Toad Treasure Tracker. That got re-released on the Switch and 3DS. I've not played it on 3DS, but I imagine that is a really, really cool way to experience that game. So why is it not in VR yet? I really hope that is an update that they include. But there's other games as well, like there's Thumpers on the Switch, which is a VR game on PlayStation VR. Can that get a virtual reality update? I really hope so. And that's the big question for me. Will we be seeing a future for Labo in terms of its VR functionality and future updates for pre-existing games, or maybe even games that haven't come out yet? Not that I think like Super Mario Maker needs something like a virtual reality mode, but are we going to be seeing VR modes in future Nintendo titles? I honestly wouldn't be holding my breath. Nintendo like to release these peripherals for their systems and then don't support them that well, but I would love to be proven wrong. I would love to be. So I guess to conclude this overly long review that I've done, is Labo VR worth it? For the price it is, I would say a definite yes. Just be wary that if you don't have a lot of space and you're okay with the thought of this probably won't be something I'm going to be able to reuse in the next year or two, then go for it. I can't speak for the main boxed bundle of like the 70, 80 pounds worth of cardboard, but the thought of making more Labo is definitely appealing to me. It's just the lack of space, honestly, and where I'm going to put it all once I finish with it, because that's why I want more games in the future to have VR abilities with Labo VR, because otherwise I feel like I've got this cardboard thing just sitting in my drawer doing nothing. But with that said, thank you for watching. Let me know if you have Labo VR or if you're thinking about getting it. It's definitely an interesting topic that I've spoken to a couple of people about whether they want to get it. The cool thing is it's Nintendo being Nintendo. Pre-existing thing is, and they just do their own spin on it, and that is Labo VR. I'm pleased it exists, I'm pleased I got it, but I just want a little bit more.